Sometimes the best things come from desperate choices. Sometimes love finds you when you've stopped looking for it. Eli Mercer was losing his father's ranch, 200 Colorado acres slipping away. So he married for land. Mae Trundell owned what he needed, the woman nobody wanted, overlooked and whispered about, lonely enough to say yes. Their wedding night changed everything. Behind Mae's ways lived a kindness so genuine, it softened something in Eli he thought died. What began as desperation became real. Seasons passed. Their bond grew honest, steady, undeniable. When outsiders tried to take Mae's land, Eli stood firm. Not for acres, for her. How does a marriage built on need become the truest love two people have ever known? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eli Mercer sat at the kitchen table of the ranch house where he was born, his calloused hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. The ledger lay open before him, pages yellowed and worn at the edges. His father's handwriting filled the columns neat at first, then gradually looser, shakier in those final months. Numbers that told a story Eli wished he could rewrite. The Mercer Ranch had stood in the high country of western Colorado for 93 years. His grandfather had homesteaded this land in 1931, 200 acres carved from wilderness with nothing but determination and a team of horses. His father, Samuel Mercer, had expanded it to 400 acres by the time Eli was born. Good years and bad, they'd held on. Raised cattle, cut hay, fixed fence in weather that could freeze a man solid or bake him dry. It was honest work that marked your hands and tested your back. But honest work didn't always pay the bills. Eli traced a finger down the column of debts. Medical expenses from his father's cancer treatment 3 years back, the new well they'd had to drill when the old one went dry, equipment repairs that came due whether you had the money or not. And underneath it all, the steady drumbeat of property taxes, insurance, feed costs, and the mortgage his father had taken out 20 years ago to buy the Henderson place when old Bill Henderson passed. 200 acres they'd bought, 200 acres they were about to lose. The bank wanted $30,000 by October 1st. That was 6 weeks away. Eli had scraped together $18,000 by selling off most of the cattle and taking work where he could find it. Fence repair for neighbors, day labor in town, even a few weeks on a construction crew in Grand Junction. But $12,000 might as well have been $12 million. He'd already asked everyone he knew, already mortgaged everything that could be mortgaged. The answer was always the same. Sorry, Eli. Times are tight. Wish I could help. He closed the ledger and pushed it away, then stood and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over the eastern ridgeline, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The meadow below the house still held its summer green, though the cottonwoods along the creek were just starting to hint at autumn yellow. His father had loved this view, used to stand in this exact spot every morning with his coffee, watching the day come on. "You did right. Buy this place, Pop," Eli said quietly to the empty room. "I'm the one letting you down." At 54, Eli Mercer looked older than his years. Weather and worry had carved lines deep into his face. His hair had gone mostly grey, and his shoulders carried the permanent stoop of a man who'd spent his life bent over hard work. But his hands were still strong, and his eyes, pale blue like his father's, still held a clarity that came from understanding exactly who he was and what he stood for. He'd never married. Came close once, back when he was 26. A woman named Sarah, who worked at the feed store in town. She was pretty and kind, and for a while he'd imagined a future kids running in the yard, family dinners, someone to share the load. But Sarah had wanted to move to Denver, wanted city life and opportunities, wanted more than a ranch in the middle of nowhere could offer. She'd given him an ultimatum: come with her, or let her go. He'd let her go. No regrets about that exactly. He'd made his choice and lived with it. But there were moments, long winter nights, mostly when the silence of the house pressed in hard, and he wondered what it might have been like to have chosen differently. The sound of tires on gravel pulled him from his thoughts. He glanced out and saw Tom Hendrick's pickup truck coming up the drive. Tom was his closest neighbor, ran cattle on the land that bordered the Mercer place to the south. Good man, steady and fair. They'd helped each other through plenty over the years. Eli met him at the door. "Morning, Tom." "Morning, Eli." Tom was a few years older, his face weathered to leather, his belly showing the comfort of good meals and a settled life. He pulled off his hat and held it in both hands. "Got a minute?" "Always." "Coffee?" "No thanks. Got to make this quick. Amy's got me on a list of chores that'll take till Christmas." Tom smiled, but there was something in his eyes, hesitation, maybe, or discomfort. "Listen, I heard about the bank situation. I'm real sorry, Eli. Your daddy was a good man, and this ranch has been Mercer land longer than most folks in this valley have been alive. Appreciate that." Tom cleared his throat. "I also heard something else. Might be nothing, might be something, but I figured you ought to know." He paused, working his jaw like the words didn't want to come out. "There's talk that Mae Trundell is looking to marry." Eli blinked. "Mae Trundell? I know it sounds strange, but Amy heard it from Judith at the post office, and Judith heard it directly from Mae herself. Apparently Mae came right out and said it. She's got land, got her own place free and clear, and she's looking for a husband. Someone who'll treat her decent and help work the property." Eli turned the name over in his mind. Mae Trundell. He knew who she was. Everyone in the valley did. She lived alone on 200 acres about 10 miles west, up near Copper Creek, kept to herself mostly, came into town for supplies once a month, didn't socialize much. She was a large woman, heavy-set in a way that made people talk. Not unkind talk, exactly, but talk nonetheless. The kind of comments folks made when they thought they were being observant rather than cruel. Why would she? Eli stopped himself. It wasn't his place to question why anyone did anything. Tom shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Look, I'm not trying to meddle in your business, but I know you need that 12,000. And Mae's got land that's paid off. Good water rights, too. Copper Creek runs year-round through her property." He put his hat back on and adjusted it carefully. "I'm just saying, if you were to approach her with a straight-up proposition, marriage of convenience, partnership to keep both your places running well, it might be worth considering. Mae's lonely, Eli, and you need what she's got. There's no shame in a practical arrangement between two practical people." Eli felt something tighten in his chest. Pride, maybe, or fear. "That's asking a lot, Tom. Of both of us. I know it. But desperation makes for strange bedfellows, and I've known you long enough to know you'll do what needs doing to save your daddy's legacy." Tom moved toward his truck, then turned back. "Just think on it. Mae's a good woman, from what Amy says. Doesn't expect romance or pretty words, just honesty and respect. That's more than a lot of marriages start with." After Tom left, Eli stood on the porch for a long time, watching the morning light spread across the valley. The idea sat in his mind like a stone, heavy and uncomfortable. Marry for land. Marry a woman he barely knew, a woman others dismissed or overlooked. Make a business arrangement out of something that ought to be more than business. But what choice did he have? He went back inside and opened the ledger again. Ran his finger down those columns of numbers, his father's increasingly shaky handwriting. Samuel Mercer had poured his life into this place, had worked himself to exhaustion and beyond, right up until the cancer took him, and with his last breath, he'd made Eli promise to keep it going, to hold on to the land no matter what. "No matter what," Eli whispered. That afternoon, he drove into town. The buildings along Main Street looked tired. In the August heat, faded paint, cracked sidewalks, a general sense of things slowly running down. He parked outside the post office and sat in his truck for 5 minutes, trying to find the right words. Finally, he got out and went inside. Judith Mason looked up from behind the Judith Post counter, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She was the kind of woman who knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves, but she wasn't malicious about it, just deeply invested in the social workings of the valley. Eli Mercer. Don't see you in here often. Need to mail something. That, why you're here. Eli took off his hat and held it, turning it in his hands. I heard Mae Trundell might be looking for a husband. Judith's eyebrows went up. Did you now? Is it true? She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Mae came in 3 weeks ago, said she was tired of being alone and tired of struggling to keep her place running. Said she wanted a partner, someone who'd work the land with her and treat her right. She asked me to pass the word. Judith leaned forward on her elbows. Can I be straight with you, Eli? I'd prefer it. Mae's had a hard life. Lost her parents young, inherited that place when she was barely 25. She's worked it alone for almost 30 years. Folks in this valley haven't always been kind to her. They judge her for her size, for keeping to herself, for not fitting whatever picture they've got in their heads of how a woman ought to be. But she's good people. Strong, honest, capable. She deserves better than she's gotten. I'm not looking to hurt anyone. I know that. Judith straightened up. I also know you're in a bind with the bank. Tom's wife already told me about his visit this morning. So let me ask you something, and I want the truth. Are you thinking about this because you need Mae's land, or because you're actually interested in Mae as a person? Eli met her eyes. I'd be lying if I said I didn't need what she's got, but I'm not looking to cheat her or use her. If she's willing to consider a practical arrangement, I'm willing to be honest about what I can offer and what I can't. She deserves that much. Judith regarded him for a long moment, then nodded. Mae lives up Copper Creek Road, white farmhouse with green shutters, about 2 miles past the old Miller place. She's usually home in the evenings. Thank you, Judith. Eli. She waited until he looked back at her. Don't go up there unless you mean it. Mae's been hurt enough. He drove home and spent the rest of the day working on fence repair in the upper pasture. Physical labor helped clear his mind, gave him time to think through what he was considering. By the time the sun started dropping toward the western mountains, he'd made his decision. He showered, put on clean clothes, and got back in his truck. The drive to Mae's place took him through country he'd known all his life, rolling hills covered in sagebrush and scattered juniper, occasional stands of aspen bright against the darkening sky. The road to Copper Creek was gravel and washboard, rough enough to rattle his teeth. Mae's house sat in a shallow valley with the creek running behind it. The place was neat and well-maintained, the white paint fresh, the yard tidy. A few chickens scratched in a wire pen beside the barn. Eli could see garden plots behind the house, rows of vegetables growing in careful lines. He parked and sat for a moment, gathering himself. Then he got out and walked to the front door. Knocked 3 times. The woman who answered was tall, nearly as tall as Eli, and broad-shouldered. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, dark brown, threaded with grey. She wore a practical cotton dress and an apron, and her face was round and pleasant, with intelligent eyes that took him in with a single glance. Mae Trundell? That's right. My name's Eli Mercer. I've got a proposition I'd like to discuss with you, if you've got time to hear it. Mae studied him for a moment, then stepped back and held the door open. Come in, Mr. Mercer. I'll put on coffee. Mae's kitchen was simple and clean. A wood stove in one corner, a porcelain sink under the window, open shelves lined with jars of preserved vegetables. The smell of fresh bread lingered in the air. She poured coffee into 2 thick ceramic mugs and set them on the table, then sat down across from Eli, with her hands folded in front of her. I heard about your situation with the bank, she said without preamble. I'm sorry about your father. Sam Mercer was a good man. You knew him? Met him a few times at the feed store years back. He always tipped his hat, always had a kind word. That means something. She took a sip of her coffee, watching him over the rim of the mug. I expect you're here because someone told you I'm looking to marry. Eli felt heat rise to his face, but he held her gaze. Yes, ma'am. And you're wondering if we might come to an arrangement that would benefit us both. Yes, ma'am. Mae set her mug down carefully. Before we go any further, I want you to understand something. I'm not a fool, Mr. Mercer. I know what people say about me. I know I'm not the kind of woman men court or write poetry about. I've made my peace with that. But I've also spent 30 years working this land by myself, and I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of struggling with work that needs 2 sets of hands, and I'm tired of wondering if anyone will even notice when I'm gone." Her voice was steady, matter-of-fact, but Eli heard the loneliness underneath. He knew that particular ache, had lived with it himself for years. "I need to be straight with you," he said. "I'm in debt to the bank, $12,000 I don't have. If I can't pay by October 1st, I lose half my father's ranch, the half he bought from the Hendersons. That's 200 acres that's been in my family for 20 years, land my father worked himself sick to purchase." He paused, forcing himself to meet her eyes. "I need help, Mae. Financial help. And I heard you have land that's paid free and clear." "I do. 200 acres and this house. Water rights to Copper Creek. No mortgage, no liens. It's mine, earned with money. My parents left me, and 30 years of my own labor. If you were willing to marry me, I could use your land as collateral to satisfy the bank. In return, I'd work your place alongside my own. Keep you from struggling alone. Split whatever profit we make down the middle. I'd treat you with respect and honesty. I won't pretend there's romance in this, but I'd be a faithful husband and a reliable partner." Mae was quiet for a long time. She looked down at her hands, work-roughened and capable. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "You know what the worst part of living alone is, Mr. Mercer. It's not the heavy lifting or the long days. It's the silence. It's eating supper by yourself every night, talking to chickens because there's no one else to talk to. It's being sick with no one to notice. It's fixing something and having no one to show. It's achieving something and having no one to share it with." She looked up, and Eli saw a deep well of loneliness in her eyes. "I don't need romance either," she said. "But I need partnership. I need respect. I need someone who'll see me as a person, not just a means to an end. Can you do that?" "I can. And when people talk, and they will talk, can you stand beside me and not be ashamed?" That question hit him harder than he expected. He thought about his father, about the values Sam Mercer had instilled in him: integrity, honesty, treating people right regardless of what others thought. "I can," he said, and meant it. Mae stood and walked to a drawer in the kitchen. She pulled out a document, yellowed with age, and brought it back to the table. The land deed, official and formal, with her name written in careful script. "This is what you need, isn't it? Proof that I own what I say I own. I'd need to show it to the bank, yes." She pushed it across the table to him. "Take it, look it over, make sure it's what you need. Then come back tomorrow evening and tell me if you want to go through with this. If you do, we'll drive to the courthouse in Grand Junction and get married the following day. No ceremony, no fuss. Just the legal arrangement we're both after." Eli picked up the deed carefully, feeling the weight of it. This piece of paper represented everything Mae had: her security, her home, her future. And she was willing to tie it to him based on one conversation and the memory of his father tipping his hat. "Why are you trusting me?" he asked. Mae smiled, a small, sad curve of her lips. "Because I'm 52 years old, and I've learned to read people. You're desperate, Mr. Mercer, but you're honest about it. You're not trying to charm me or fool me. You're laying your cards on the table and asking for a fair trade. That's more than most people have ever offered me." She paused. "And because I'd rather take a chance on companionship than die alone in this house with no one to know or care." Eli folded the deed carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. "I'll be back tomorrow evening with an answer. I'll have supper ready at 6. They stood together, and Mae walked him to the door. The sun had set while they talked, and the valley was full of long shadows and cricket song. Eli paused on the porch, hat in hand. "Thank you for hearing me out. Thank you for being honest." He drove home in the gathering dark, the deed resting against his chest. That night, he spread it out on the kitchen table next to his father's ledger. 2 documents, 2 legacies, 2 people's entire lives reduced to paper and ink. He thought about Mae's question: could he stand beside her without shame? Could he be the partner she deserved, even if this started as necessity rather than love? He looked at his father's handwriting in the ledger, remembered Sam Mercer's steady presence, his quiet integrity. His father had taught him that a man's worth wasn't measured in money or status, but in how he treated others, especially those others dismissed or overlooked. Eli made his decision. The next evening, he arrived at Mae's house at 10 minutes to 6. She answered the door in a clean dress, her hair freshly pinned, and gestured him inside. The table was set for 2 simple dishes, but the care was evident. She'd made pot roast with potatoes and carrots, biscuits that steamed when broken open, green beans from her garden. They sat down together, and for a moment neither spoke. Then Eli reached across the table and offered his hand. Mae looked at it, then took it. Her grip was warm and strong. "If you'll have me," he said, "I'd like to be your husband. I'll work hard for both our places. I'll treat you with respect and honesty. I'll stand beside you, no matter what people say, and I'll do my best to make sure you're never lonely again." Mae's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "Then I accept your proposal, Eli Mercer, and I'll do the same for you." They ate supper together, talking about practical things, how to manage 2 properties, what equipment they'd need, where they'd live. Eli suggested they stay at his place since it was larger and centrally located, but spend time at Mae's house too, keep both maintained. Mae agreed. They discussed finances openly, laying out exactly what each of them had and owed. It was the most honest conversation Eli had ever had with another person. 2 days later, they stood in front of a county clerk in Grand Junction and spoke their vows. No family present, no friends, no flowers or music. Just 2 practical people making a practical arrangement, binding their lives together with legal words and signed documents. The clerk pronounced them married, and Eli took Mae's hand. Her fingers trembled slightly in his, but her face was calm. They walked out of the courthouse into bright September sunshine as husband and wife. "Well," Mae said softly, "I suppose that's done." "I suppose it is." They drove back to the ranch in Eli's truck, Mae's few belongings loaded in the bed. She was quiet during the sun. Drive, looking out at the passing landscape. Eli wondered what she was thinking, what she was feeling. Regret? Relief? Fear? When they pulled up to the ranch house, Mae stared at it for a long moment. "This is home now," she said, as if testing the words. "If you'll have it." She turned to him, and something in her expression made his chest tighten. "I'll do my best to be a good wife to you, Eli, in all the ways that matter. I know you will." They carried her things inside together, and Eli showed her to the main bedroom, his parents' old room, the one with the best light and the view of the eastern mountains. She stood in the doorway, looking at the bed, and Eli saw her shoulders tense. "I'll sleep in the spare room," he said quietly. "This is yours. I won't presume anything beyond what we agreed to." Mae turned to him, relief evident in her face. "Thank you." That night, as darkness settled over the ranch, Eli lay in the narrow bed of the spare room and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of someone else in the house. Water running, footsteps, the creak of bed springs. And he wondered what exactly he'd gotten himself into, and whether either of them would come to regret this desperate bargain they'd made. The first week of marriage was awkward in ways neither of them had anticipated. They were 2 people who'd lived alone for years, suddenly sharing space and routines. Eli woke at 4:30 out of habit, tried to move quietly so as not to disturb Mae, only to find her already in the kitchen making coffee. They'd stand there in the pre-dawn darkness, both surprised, both uncertain what to say. Morning became their ritual. Just that one word, accompanied by a nod. Mae cooked breakfast while Eli did the morning feeding. She made simple, hearty food, eggs and bacon, biscuits, fried potatoes. Eli ate it gratefully, complimented it sincerely, and then they'd both head outside to work. Together but separate, 2 people orbiting each other like planets that hadn't quite figured out their paths. The bank had accepted Mae's land as collateral, and Eli had made his payment. The relief he felt was enormous, but it came with a new weight. He owed Mae everything now. Not just gratitude, but his father's entire legacy. That debt felt heavier than the one to the bank ever had. They worked on fence repair the first few days, Mae proving herself as capable as any ranch hand Eli had ever hired. She could swing a post-hole digger with steady rhythm, stretch wire tight without being told, and seemed to know instinctively where weak points needed reinforcing. She didn't complain about the heat or the physical strain, just worked steadily, competently, her face set in concentration, but she was also shy around him. Eli noticed how she'd flinch slightly if he came too close, how she'd turn away when changing work gloves, as if worried he'd be watching. She kept conversation strictly to the task at hand. Should we replace this post or shore it? Up. We're running low on staples. I'll get water. In the evenings, they'd return to the house tired and dusty. Mae would start supper while Eli showered. Then they'd eat together at the kitchen table, the silence between them growing longer each night. Eli wanted to break it, wanted to find something to talk about beyond cattle and weather, but everything he thought to say seemed inadequate or too personal. On the fifth night, as Mae was washing dishes and Eli was drying, his elbow knocked against a stack of books on the counter. They tumbled to the floor with a clatter. He bent to pick them up and froze. They were cookbooks, old ones, their covers worn soft with use. The top one had Mae Mercer written inside the front cover in his mother's neat handwriting. "I found these in the pantry," Mae said quietly. "I hope you don't mind. I was looking for mason jars and saw them on the shelf. I've been reading through them at night." Eli opened the book carefully. His mother's notes filled the margins, adjustments to recipes, comments about what his father liked, small observations. "Dad loved this one. Cut sugar by half. Too sweet otherwise." Eli's favorite birthday cake. A lump formed in his throat. "I didn't know these were still here. Your mother was a good cook, from what I can tell. Smart about stretching ingredients, making do with what was on hand." Mae wiped her hands on a dish towel. "There's a recipe for apple butter that looks wonderful, and another for venison stew that I'd like to try." Eli turned the pages, seeing his childhood in these stained and splattered recipes. His mother had died when he was 19, a quick illness that took her before they really understood how serious it was. His father had packed away most of her things, too grief-stricken to look at them. Eli had done the same after his father died, but Mae had found them, had seen value in them. "She'd be glad someone's using them," he said. "She always said recipes were meant to be shared, not hidden away." Something shifted in Mae's expression. "Could you tell me about her, if it's not too hard?" They moved to the living room, and for the first time since the wedding, they sat together on the couch. Eli talked about his mother, Mae Mercer, who'd grown up in Grand Junction and fallen in love with a rancher, despite her parents' objections. How she'd learned to cook on a wood stove, to preserve food for winter, to make beauty out of simple things. How she'd kept a garden that was the envy of the valley, growing vegetables and flowers side by side. She was practical, Eli said, but she was also kind. When neighbors struggled, she'd show up with food and help, never making a fuss about it. She taught me that taking care of people mattered more than taking care of pride. Mae listened intently, her hands folded in her lap. When Eli finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My mother was like that too, practical and kind. She died when I was 15. Cancer. My father tried to carry on, but he was lost without her. Died 3 years later of what the doctor called a heart attack, but I always thought it was just a broken heart. That's hard, being alone that young. It was, but it taught me to be self-sufficient, maybe too self-sufficient." She paused, then added softly, "I'm not very good at this, Eli, at being with someone. I don't know the right things to say or do." "Neither do I." They looked at each other, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. They were both stumbling through this, both trying to figure out how to share a life they'd each lived alone for so long. "Could I make your mother's apple butter recipe?" Mae asked. "There's a tree behind the house full of apples going to waste. I'd like that." The next morning, Mae got up even earlier than usual. Eli found her in the kitchen with bushels of apples already peeled and sliced, the old cookbook open on the counter. She worked through the day, cooking down the apples with spices and sugar, stirring the massive pot on the stove. The house filled with the scent of cinnamon and cloves, warm and comforting. Eli came in at lunch to find her standing over the pot, her face flushed from the heat, her hair escaping its pins. She looked up when he entered, and for the first time, she smiled at him. A real smile, unguarded and genuine. "Taste this," she said, holding out a spoonful. He tasted it. The sweetness, the spice, the hint of tartness, it was exactly as he remembered from childhood, exactly as his mother used to make it. "It's perfect," he said, his voice rough. Mae's smile widened. "Your mother knew what she was doing." They canned the apple butter together that evening, working side by side in the steamy kitchen. Eli sterilized jars while Mae filled them, both of them moving in a rhythm that was becoming familiar. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt different now, companionable rather than awkward. When they finished, 32 jars of apple butter lined the counter, sealed and cooling. Mae wiped her forehead with her apron and looked at them with satisfaction. "That'll get us through winter and then some. Thank you for doing this. It's what partners do, isn't it? Take care of each other." That night, before heading to the spare room, Eli paused in the hallway. "Mae," she turned from the doorway of the main bedroom. "Yes? I'm glad you found those cookbooks. I'm glad you're here." Her expression softened. "I'm glad too, Eli. It was a small thing, those words, but they mattered." In the darkness of the spare room, Eli thought about Mae standing over the stove, making his mother's recipe with such care, thought about her smile, unguarded for that brief moment. And he wondered if maybe, just maybe, this arrangement they'd made might become something more than either of them had expected. 3 weeks into the marriage, they drove to Mae's property to check on things. The house looked lonely in the afternoon light, windows dark and empty. Mae stood on the porch for a moment, her hand on the doorframe, and Eli saw something pass across her face. Sadness, maybe, or regret. "We should come here once a week," he said. "Keep the place maintained. Make sure everything's running right. You don't have to do that. We're partners. This is part of our land now, same as the other place." Inside, the house held the stillness of abandonment. Mae moved through the rooms slowly, checking windows, running water in the sink, making sure mice hadn't gotten in. Eli walked the property, examining the barn and outbuildings, noting what needed attention. The chicken coop was empty. Now they'd moved the birds to the main ranch. But the garden still had late-season vegetables, and the apple trees behind the house were heavy with fruit. When he came back inside, he found Mae in what must have been her father's study. A small room with a desk, some bookshelves, and a window overlooking Copper Creek. She was standing at the desk, holding something in her hands, and when she turned, he saw tears on her face. "What's wrong?" She held out the object. A pocket watch, gold-plated and tarnished with age. "It was my father's. I kept it on the desk to remember him. But the chain must have gotten caught when I was moving things, and—" Her voice broke. "The crystals cracked. The hands won't move." Eli took the watch carefully. The glass face was indeed cracked, a spider web of fractures spreading from a central impact point. When he wound the stem, nothing happened. "Let me look at it. It's probably ruined. I should have been more careful. Nothing's ruined unless we decide it is. Come on." They drove back to the main ranch, and Eli took the watch to his workshop in the barn. It was a small space, cluttered with tools and projects in various states of completion. He cleared a spot on the workbench and turned on the bright overhead lamp. Mae stood in the doorway, watching. "My grandfather taught me watch repair," Eli said, selecting a set of tiny screwdrivers from a drawer. "Said every man should know how to fix the things that matter. I haven't done it in years, but I'll try." He worked carefully, removing the cracked crystal, examining the delicate mechanism inside. The impact had jarred one of the tiny gears loose, and the mainspring was partially unwound. Not catastrophic damage, but it would take patience to fix. Mae moved closer, watching his hands. What do you need to do? Reset this gear here, then wind the spring back properly. The crystal we can replace. I've got some old watch parts in a box somewhere. He glanced up at her. Tell me about your father. She settled onto a stool nearby, her voice soft. His name was Robert. He was a quiet man, thoughtful. He loved this valley, loved working the land. When my mother died, something in him just broke. But he kept going for me, made sure I knew how to take care of myself, how to manage the property. He gave me this watch when I turned 21, said it had been his father's, and now it was mine to pass on. To your own children, that's what he hoped. But she stopped, looking down at her hands. That didn't happen. Eli worked in silence for a moment, then said carefully, You never wanted children? I wanted them very much, but wanting doesn't make it so. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but he heard the old pain underneath. I was never the kind of woman men courted. By the time I'd accepted that, I'd also accepted I'd likely never have a family of my own. I'm sorry. Don't be. We all carry disappointments. Some are just more visible than others. He found the box of watch parts and selected a crystal that would fit. Working carefully with tweezers and steady hands, he reset the gear, rewound the spring, and secured the new crystal in place. When he wound the watch again, the hands began to move, ticking steadily. There, he said, holding it out to her. Good as new. Mae took the watch, her eyes shining. She held it to her ear, listening to the tick. Thank you, Eli. This means more than you know. It's what partners do. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then, hesitantly, she reached out and touched his hand. Just a brief touch, her fingers on his knuckles, but it sent a jolt through him. You're a good man. That evening, Mae made a special supper, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh green beans, and a pie made from the apples they'd picked. She set the table with care, even put out cloth napkins and the good dishes that had been gathering dust in the cupboard. What's the occasion? Eli asked. No occasion. Just wanted to do something nice. They ate together, and for the first time the conversation flowed naturally. Mae asked about his grandfather, about learning watch repair. Eli asked about her life before the marriage, about running the property alone. They talked about neighbors they both knew, about the valley's history, about the changes they'd seen over the years. After supper, they sat on the porch with coffee, watching the stars come out. The night was cool, hinting at the autumn to come. Mae wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and Eli found himself noticing small things about her, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the thoughtful expression she got when considering something, the quiet grace in her movements. Can I ask you something? Mae said after a while. Anything. Do you regret this? Marrying me? Eli turned to look at her, surprised. Why would you think that? Because you could have found another way, sold more cattle, taken on more debt. You didn't have to tie yourself to someone like me. Someone like you? You know what I mean? She gestured at herself, her voice tight. I'm not blind, Eli. I know what people see when they look at me. He was quiet. For a moment, choosing his words carefully, I see someone who's worked hard their whole life, someone who's honest and capable and kind, someone who's never asked for pity or made excuses. Someone who took a chance on a desperate stranger because she was lonely and brave enough to do something about it. He paused. I don't regret marrying you, Mae. Not for a second. Her eyes glistened in the starlight. I don't regret it either. They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer. Then Mae stood, gathering the coffee cups. At the door, she paused. Eli, would you mind sitting with me for a while? In the living room? I'm not ready to go to bed yet, and I'm tired of being alone in the evenings. I'd like that. They sat together on the couch, not touching, but close enough that Eli could feel her warmth. Mae picked up one of his mother's cookbooks and paged through it slowly, commenting on recipes, asking questions about his family. Eli found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years, the knot of tension he'd carried for so long beginning to loosen. Around 10, Mae yawned and closed the book. I should let you get some rest. Mae, Eli started, then stopped, not sure what he wanted to say. She looked at him, waiting. "Thank you for making this feel like a home again," she smiled, that unguarded smile he was learning to treasure. "Thank you for fixing my father's watch, for seeing it as important." After she went to bed, Eli sat alone in the living room for a while, thinking. This marriage had started as necessity, as a practical arrangement between two lonely people. But something was changing. Small moments were adding up: shared work, shared meals, shared stories. The careful distance they'd maintained was closing, degree by degree. And Eli found, to his surprise, that he wanted it to close. Wanted to know more about this woman who'd become his wife. Wanted to hear her laugh, see her smile, understand what made her happy or sad. Wanted, most of all, for her to know she mattered, not for her land or what she could provide, but for herself. He went to the spare room and lay awake in the darkness, listening to the house settle around him. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something that might have been hope. October came in cold and clear, the aspens turning gold across the mountainsides. Eli and Mae had fallen into a rhythm, working together during the day, sharing meals, spending evenings in the living room, talking or reading. The distance between them was closing, but there was still a line neither of them had crossed. Eli still slept in the spare room. They still moved carefully around each other, aware of the boundary their practical arrangement had set. But something was shifting. Eli caught himself watching Mae more often, the way she hummed while cooking, the gentle way she talked to the animals, the quiet satisfaction on her face when a day's work was done well. He found himself wanting to make her smile, wanting to ease the wariness that still sometimes shadowed her eyes. One afternoon, they drove into town for supplies. As they walked down Main Street, Eli noticed people watching. Not hostile, exactly, but curious, speculative. Judith Mason waved from the post office. Tom Hendricks nodded from across the street. But there were others, women clustered outside the general store, who whispered behind their hands as Mae passed. Eli saw Mae's shoulders tighten, saw her chin lift in that defensive way she had. When they entered the store, she moved quickly through the aisles, gathering what they needed without lingering. At the counter, Clara Bennett rang up their purchases with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Heard you two got married," Clara said, her tone bright and false. "That was quick." "We saw no reason to wait," Eli replied evenly. "Of course not." Clara bagged the supplies, her movements precise. "Must be nice, Mae, having someone to help with all that land. Quite the arrangement you worked out." Mae's face went carefully blank. "Yes. Quite the arrangement." Outside, they loaded the supplies in silence. As Eli started the truck, Mae stared straight ahead, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "They think you married me for my land. Let them think what they want. They think I bought a husband, that I was so desperate and lonely I had to pay someone to marry me." Eli pulled the truck to the side of the road and turned to face her. "Mae, look at me." She did, reluctantly. "I don't care what they think. What matters is what we know. We made an honest arrangement between two honest people. There's no shame in that, isn't there?" Her voice was bitter. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I did buy a husband. Maybe that's all this is. Is that what you believe?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know what to believe anymore. A month ago this was simple, a practical arrangement. But now—" She stopped, shaking her head. "Now I don't know what this is." Eli didn't know either, but he knew what he wanted it to be. He reached across and took her hand, feeling her flinch slightly before relaxing into his grip. "It's whatever we make it. Nothing more, nothing less." They drove home in silence, but Eli didn't let go of her hand. That evening, after supper, Eli excused himself and drove back to town. The jewelry store was still open, a small shop tucked between the bank and the hardware store. Old man Morrison looked up from his workbench as Eli entered. "Eli Mercer, been a while. Mr. Morrison, I need a ring." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "Wedding ring?" "Yes, sir. Heard you got married. Congratulations." Morrison moved to a display case, unlocking it with a small key. Looking for anything particular? Eli studied the rings. Most were too fancy, too ornate. Mae wasn't the type for diamonds and elaborate settings. He wanted something simple, honest, like her. His eyes fell on a plain gold band, elegant in its simplicity. That one. Morrison pulled it out, holding it up to the light. Good choice. Solid gold, no frills. Built to last. He paused. What size? Eli realized he didn't know Mae's ring size. Morrison smiled knowingly. Bring her in tomorrow, we'll size it properly. No, I want to give it to her tonight. Eli thought about Mae's hands, strong and capable. Start with an 8, and we'll adjust if needed. Morrison nodded and took the ring to his workbench. While he worked, Eli browsed the store, his eyes falling on a simple chain necklace. Something about it reminded him of Mae, unpretentious but beautiful in its simplicity. He bought that too. At home, he found Mae in the kitchen, washing dishes. She looked up when he entered, something uncertain in her expression. Where'd you go? Had an errand. He pulled the small box from his pocket and set it on the counter between them. I realized I never gave you a proper wedding ring. Mae stared at the box, her hands still in the dishwater. Eli, open it. She dried her hands slowly and picked up the box. When she opened it, her breath caught. The gold band gleamed in the kitchen light, simple and perfect. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. He took the ring from the box and held out his hand. May I? Mae extended her left hand, trembling slightly. Eli slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Mae stared at it, tears welling in her eyes. There's something else, Eli said, pulling out the necklace. Turn around. She did, and he fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers brushing the warm skin at her nape. Mae touched the chain, then turned back to face him. Why? Because you're my wife. And I wanted you to have something that shows it. He paused, gathering courage for what he needed to say. Mae, this started as an arrangement. I won't lie about that. But somewhere along the way, it became more, at least for me. I can't pinpoint exactly when. Maybe it was the apple butter, or fixing your father's watch, or just the 100 small moments we've shared. But I need you to know this isn't just an arrangement anymore. Not for me. Mae's tears spilled over. I thought I was the only one feeling that. I thought I was foolish for hoping. Eli stepped closer, close enough that he could feel her warmth, smell the scent of soap and kitchen herbs that clung to her. You're not foolish, and you're not alone. Eli, I'm not the kind of woman you probably imagined ending up with. You're exactly the kind of woman I need. Strong, honest, capable, kind. You see me, Mae. Not what I own or what I can provide, but me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? She reached up and touched his face, her work-roughened fingers gentle against his cheek. You see me too. The real me. Not just what people think they see. They stood there, close enough to kiss, the air between them charged. With possibility. Eli wanted to close the distance, wanted to hold her, but he waited. This had to be her choice too. Mae made it. She leaned forward, slowly, giving him time to pull back if he wanted. When her lips met his, it was soft and tentative, a question asked and answered. Eli wrapped his arms around her, feeling her solid warmth, the way she fit against him. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I think, Mae whispered, we should stop sleeping in separate rooms. Are you sure? I'm tired of being alone, Eli. I'm tired of pretending this is just an arrangement. I want a real marriage. With you. That night, for the first time, they shared the main bedroom. They moved together cautiously at first, two people learning a new language. But gradually, tenderness gave way to something deeper. Passion, yes, but also recognition, a sense of coming home after a long journey. Later, as Mae slept beside him, Eli lay awake watching moonlight paint patterns on the ceiling. Her hand rested on his chest, the gold band gleaming. He thought about how his life had changed in just 2 months, how desperate necessity had transformed into genuine connection, how loneliness had given way to companionship and companionship to love. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, But tonight, with Mae warm and safe beside him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt complete. The weeks that followed were the happiest Eli could remember. He and Mae worked side by side during the days, their movements synchronized from practice and growing understanding. They'd developed a shorthand, could communicate with a glance or gesture. At night, they'd share the main bedroom, falling asleep to the sound of each other's breathing, waking tangled together in the early morning light. Mae bloomed under the attention and affection. She laughed more easily now, her wariness giving way to confidence. She'd always been capable, but now she carried herself with a quiet pride. Eli loved watching that transformation, loved knowing he'd played a part in it. One morning in late October, over breakfast, Mae said, "I've been thinking about the two properties. We're spending half our time driving back and forth. What if we created a connecting path? Cut through the eastern section of your land to the western edge of mine. It would save us an hour a day." Eli considered it. "That's rough country. We'd need to clear brush, maybe grade a road, or just a good trail. Something we could take the horses on, or the truck in decent weather." She traced a line on the kitchen table with her finger. "Right here, through the gap in the ridge. It's the most direct route. We'd need a gate where the properties meet, something sturdy. We could build it ourselves. Your grandfather was a blacksmith, wasn't he? Didn't you tell me you learned some of that?" Eli smiled. "Enough to be dangerous." They spent the next 2 weeks on the project, first clearing the section, trail, cutting brush, and removing fallen trees, then grading a path wide enough for the truck. It was hard work, but satisfying. They'd break for lunch in the shade of the aspens, sharing sandwiches and water, talking about nothing and everything. When the trail was finished, they started on the gate. Eli fired up his grandfather's old forge in the workshop, the one that had sat cold for years. Mae worked the bellows while he heated the metal, both of them sweating in the reflected heat. He showed her how to shape the iron, how to judge when it was ready to work. The gate took shape slowly, iron posts and crossbars, strong enough to last generations. Eli welded Mae's initials on one side, his on the other. At the center, where they met, he added a simple design, 2 overlapping circles, like a Venn diagram, representing their joined lives. On a cold November morning, they installed the gate at the boundary between their properties. Eli set the posts, while Mae mixed concrete. When it was finished, they stood back to admire their work. The gate stood solid and straight, painted black against the autumn landscape. "Now we're truly connected," Mae said softly. Eli took her hand. "We were already connected. This just makes it official." That evening, Tom Hendricks stopped by. He accepted coffee but seemed uneasy, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Finally, he said, "Eli, I need to tell you something. There's been talk in town. There's always talk. This is different. You know the Brennan Corporation? That development company out of Denver." Eli felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I've heard of them. They've been buying up land in the valley, quiet-like, through intermediaries. But word is they're planning some kind of resort development, golf courses, vacation homes, the whole thing." Tom paused. "They've approached several people about selling, offered good money. They approach you?" "Last week. I turned them down." Tom looked uncomfortable. "But they've been asking about Mae's property specifically. The water rights to Copper Creek are valuable, and her land sits right where they want to build." Mae had come to stand in the doorway, listening. "What did you tell them?" "That it's not my business to tell. But Eli, you should know they don't take no for an answer easily. They'll make offers, apply pressure. They've got lawyers and money and patience." After Tom left, Mae sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded tightly. "They're going to come after my land." "Our land," Eli corrected. "And let them try. We're not selling. You don't understand. I've dealt with them before. 5 years ago they approached my father. He refused, and they made his life hell. Complaints to the county about supposed code violations, lawyers filing frivolous claims. They tried to argue his water rights weren't valid. He fought them for 2 years before they finally gave up and looked elsewhere. Her voice shook slightly. It nearly broke him. The stress, the legal fees. I think it contributed to his heart attack. Eli moved to her side, kneeling so he could look into her eyes. I won't let that happen. We'll fight them together. It's my land they want. Maybe I should just... No, this is about more than land now. This is about our life, Mae. The one we're building together. Nobody gets to take that from us. She touched his face, her eyes searching his. Promise me something. Promise that if it gets too hard, if they threaten to take everything, you'll consider selling. I won't have you lose your father's ranch because of me. That's not going to happen. Promise me, Eli. He took her hands in his. I promise we'll face whatever comes together. That's all I can promise. The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up the drive. Two men in expensive suits got out, carrying briefcases. Eli met them on the porch, Mae standing beside him. Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Mercer? The taller man extended his hand. My name is Richard Cornwall. I represent the Brennan Corporation. We'd like to discuss a business opportunity with you. Not interested, Eli said. Cornwall smiled, unperturbed. You haven't heard our offer yet. We're prepared to pay top dollar for your wife's property on Copper Creek, well above market value. Enough that you could pay off any debts and still have substantial capital left over. The property's not for sale. Mr. Mercer, be reasonable. This valley is changing. Development is coming whether you like it or not. You can either benefit from that change or be left behind. He pulled papers from his briefcase. We're offering $400,000. That's twice what the property is worth. Mae stepped forward. My father fought you people. I know your tactics. The answer is no. Cornwall's smile thinned. Mrs. Mercer, your father was a stubborn man who made poor decisions. I'd hate to see you repeat his mistakes. This valley needs economic development. We're bringing jobs, tourism, prosperity. Don't you want to be part of that? What I want, Mae said steadily, is for you to leave our property. The second man spoke for the first time. You should reconsider. We have ways of making things difficult for those who stand in the way of progress. Eli took a step forward. That sounded like a threat, a statement of fact. The county has been very cooperative with our plans. I'm sure they'd be interested to know about any potential code violations or environmental concerns on your properties. He pulled out a business card and set it on the porch rail. Think about our offer. We'll be in touch. They drove away, leaving dust hanging in the air. Mae was shaking, and Eli put his arm around her. They can't force us to sell. They'll try. They'll find ways to make it impossible to stay. That night, lying in bed, Mae curled against Eli's chest. I'm scared, she whispered. Not of losing the land, but of this changing us. Changing what we've found. Eli held her closer. Nothing's going to change us. We're stronger together than they are with all their money and lawyers. I hope you're right. But as Eli lay awake in the darkness, listening to Mae's breathing, even out into sleep, he felt a knot of worry forming. They'd built something precious here, something neither of them had expected to find, and now outsiders were threatening to tear it apart. He thought about the gate they'd built, the symbol of their connected properties and connected lives, strong and solid, meant to last. He had to believe their relationship was the same, that whatever came, they could face it together. But deep down, he wondered if love and determination would be enough against corporate power and greed. 2 weeks after the Brennan Corporation's visit, Mae received a citation from the county. Alleged environmental violations on her Copper Creek property, improper waste disposal, unauthorized stream diversion, failure to maintain erosion controls. The list went on for 3 pages, each item carrying potential fines totaling over $15,000. This is how it starts, Mae said, her hands shaking as she held the document. This is exactly what they did to my father. Eli studied the citations carefully. Half of these are fabricated. You've never diverted the stream. There's no waste disposal issue. Someone's making things up. That's what my father said too. But it doesn't matter if they're true. We still have to fight them, still have to pay lawyers, still have to deal with inspectors and hearings and appeals. It's designed to exhaust us. They drove to Mae's property that afternoon to document everything, to gather evidence that the citations were false. While Eli photographed the creek and surrounding land, Mae went into the house to look for her father's old property records. She was gone for over an hour. When Eli went to check on her, he found her in her father's study, surrounded by papers, tears streaming down her face. In her hands, she held a leather-bound journal. "Mae, what's wrong?" She looked up at him, her face stricken. "I found this, hidden in a false bottom of his desk drawer. Eli, my father didn't die of a heart attack. They killed him." Eli sat down beside her, taking the journal carefully. The entries were in Robert Trundell's neat handwriting, dated over a 2-year period. What Eli read made his blood run cold. Robert had documented everything, every threatening phone call from the Brennan Corporation, every false citation, every attempt to intimidate or pressure him. He'd recorded names, dates, amounts offered. But more than that, he discovered something that explained why they wanted the land so badly. Preliminary geological surveys showed potential mineral deposits on the Copper Creek property, not gold or silver, but rare earth elements used in electronics manufacturing, worth millions, possibly tens of millions. The Brennan Corporation had commissioned the survey secretly, using a shell company. Robert had gotten hold of the report through a friend at the county office. The journal entries grew more desperate as time went on. Robert wrote about the stress affecting his health, about chest pains and trouble sleeping, about feeling cornered and alone. The final entry was dated 3 days before his death. "They came to the house again today. 3 men. They said if I didn't sell, they'd make sure Mae suffered for it. Said they had ways of making life impossible for a woman alone. I can't let that happen. But I can't sell either. This land is her inheritance, her security. I don't know what to do. The chest pain is worse. Doctor, Mitchell wants me to go to the hospital, but I can't afford to be weak right now. I have to protect Mae." Eli closed the journal, his jaw tight. "Have you read all of it?" "Most of it." Mae's voice was barely a whisper. "I knew he was stressed about the Brennan Corporation, but I didn't know it was this bad. He hid it from me, Eli, all of it. He was trying to protect me, and it killed him. He died of a heart attack, Mae. That's what the death certificate says. But what caused the heart attack? The stress, the threats, the constant pressure. They might as well have pulled a trigger." She stood abruptly and moved to the window, staring out at Copper Creek. "And now, they're doing the same thing to us. To me." Again, Eli stood and went to her, putting his hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me. Your father fought them alone. You're not alone. We have evidence now. We have his documentation. We can fight back." "How?" "Take on a multi-million-dollar corporation with a journal full of accusations. They'll have lawyers that will tie us up in court for years. Then we find another way." Eli's mind was racing. "Your father discovered they wanted the land for mineral rights. That survey was done without proper permission. And if they threatened him, if they've been filing false citations and using intimidation tactics, that's illegal. Corporate or not, they can't operate outside the law. Can't they? Who's going to stop them?" Mae turned to face him. "Be honest with me, Eli. Is this fight worth losing everything? Your ranch, our peace, our marriage? Because that's what they'll take. They'll grind us down until there's nothing left. Our marriage isn't going anywhere, isn't it? What happens when the legal fees pile up? When we can't make mortgage payments because every penny goes to fighting them? When the stress and pressure turn us against each other?" Her eyes were desperate. "I've seen it happen. My father withered under this. What if you do too? What if I do?" Eli pulled her close, feeling her trembling. "That's not going to happen. I won't let it." But even as he said it, he felt the weight of what they were facing. A corporation with unlimited resources, political connections, and no apparent ethics, against 2 people with a journal full of accusations and limited means to fight. That night, they barely slept. Eli lay awake, Mae curled against him, both of them thinking about what came next. Around 3 in the morning, Mae spoke into the darkness. What if we gave them what they wanted? Not the land, but access to the minerals. We could negotiate a royalty agreement, keep the surface rights, let them extract whatever they're after underground. You think they'd agree to that? Probably not, but it might be worth trying. At least, we'd know we explored every option. Eli thought about his promise to her, that they'd face this together, but that if it got too hard, they'd consider alternatives. We can try. But Mae, if they refuse, if they insist on buying the whole property, we need to be prepared to fight, really fight. I know. The next morning, Eli called Richard Cornwall. The man answered on the second ring, his voice smooth and professional. Mr. Mercer, reconsidering our offer? I want to discuss alternatives. My wife and I are willing to negotiate mineral rights, but we're keeping the land. There was a pause. That's not how we do business. Maybe it should be. You get what you're really after, we keep our property. Everyone wins. The Brennan Corporation isn't interested in everyone winning, Mr. Mercer. We're interested in acquiring the property. Full stop. Cornwall's voice hardened. I heard about those citations from the county. Unfortunate situation. Could get worse, though. Much worse. Fire inspections, zoning reviews, water rights challenges. The list is endless. That sounds like extortion. That sounds like due diligence. Sometimes, when people don't cooperate, problems surface. Problems that were always there, just overlooked. He paused. You have a week to reconsider. After that, things get complicated. The line went dead. Eli set the phone down carefully, fighting the urge to throw it across the room. Mae stood in the kitchen doorway, her face pale. They said no. They said no, and threatened us again. She moved to the table and sat down heavily. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mae said quietly, "Show me the journal again." They spent the rest of the day going through Robert Trundell's documentation. The journal was meticulous, dates, names, specific threats and offers. Near the back, they found something else. Copies of the geological survey, the one Robert had obtained illegally from his contact at the county office, and tucked inside the back cover, a business card. The name on it was Daniel Reeves, attorney at law, with a Denver address. On the back, in Robert's handwriting, "Trust this man, he'll help. My father mentioned a lawyer friend once," Mae said. "Someone he went to school with. I didn't realize he'd been planning to fight back." Eli held the card up to the light. "Then let's honor his plan. Let's call this Daniel Reeves and see if he's willing to help finish what your father started." Mae looked at him, something shifting in her expression. Fear giving way to determination. "You're sure about this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back." "I'm sure. They took your father from you. They're not taking anything else." She reached across the table and took his hand. The gold wedding band gleamed on her finger, a reminder of the commitment they'd made. Not just to each other, but to the life they were building together. "Then we fight," Mae said. "Then we fight," Eli agreed. Outside, November wind rattled the windows, carrying the first hint of winter. But inside, warming themselves with coffee and resolve, Eli and Mae began planning their counterattack. They had Robert Trundell's journal, his documentation, and the name of a lawyer who might help. It wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had that morning. And sometimes, Eli thought, that's how you started winning, one small advantage at a time. Daniel Reeves agreed to meet them the following Tuesday. His office was in downtown Denver, a modest suite in an older building that spoke of steady practice rather than flashy success. He was in his mid-60s, grey-haired and lean, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. When they handed him Robert Trundell's journal, he spent 20 minutes reading it without speaking. Finally, he looked up. "Bob was my friend, one of the best men I knew. When he died, I suspected the Brennan Corporation had something to do with it, but I couldn't prove it. He'd mentioned their harassment, but never showed me documentation." He tapped the journal. "This changes things." "Can we use it?" Eli asked. "To stop them? Possibly. The problem is, most of what's in here is difficult to prove in court. Verbal threats, pressure tactics, intimidation. It's all he said, she said, unless we have corroborating evidence or witnesses." Daniel leaned back in his chair. However, the geological survey is something else entirely. If the Brennan Corporation commissioned that survey without proper authorization from the landowner, that's trespassing at minimum, potentially theft of proprietary information. And if they've been using falsified county citations to pressure you, that's fraud and potentially criminal conspiracy. "So we can fight them?" Mae asked. "We can. But I need to be straight with you. This won't be quick or easy. They have resources and political connections. They'll drag this out, try to exhaust you financially and emotionally." He paused. "I'm willing to take this on, but you need to understand what you're committing to. It could take years." Eli and Mae exchanged glances. Then Mae said, "My father fought them alone, and it killed him. We're fighting them together. That makes us stronger." Daniel smiled. "That's what Bob always said about you, that you were stronger than people gave you credit for." He opened a legal pad and began making notes. "Here's what we need. First, comprehensive documentation of both. Properties, photographs, videos, detailed records proving those county citations are false. Second, affidavits from anyone who witnessed the Brennan Corporation's intimidation tactics. Third, we need to establish exactly how they obtained that geological survey." "What about the media?" Eli asked. "If we can show that a corporation is harassing ordinary citizens, driving people to early graves, wouldn't that create public pressure?" "Possibly. But media can also escalate things unpredictably. Let's build our legal case first, then consider going public if necessary." Daniel closed the pad. "I'll start drafting our response to the county citations and filing a complaint about corporate harassment. You two focus on documentation. I need evidence that would convince a judge they're acting in bad faith. They left Denver with a plan and a sense of purpose." Over the next 2 weeks, they worked systematically. Eli bought a professional quality camera and spent days photographing every inch of both properties. He documented the creek, showing it flowing in its natural channel with no diversions. He photographed the waste areas, showing proper containment. He recorded every detail that contradicted the county citations. Mae tracked down people who'd known her father during his fight with Brennan. Most were reluctant to get involved, afraid of corporate retaliation, but 3 agreed to provide written statements about witnessing intimidation tactics. Tom Hendricks was one of them, describing how Brennan representatives had threatened Robert in public, how they'd spread rumors about his mental stability, how they'd made it clear that refusal to sell would have consequences. At night, they'd sit at the kitchen table, organizing materials, reviewing Daniel's legal strategy. The work was exhausting, but it brought them closer. They were partners in the truest sense, united against a common threat, each depending on the other's strength. One evening in late November, as the first snow began to fall, Mae looked up from a stack of property surveys. "Eli, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Do you ever regret it? Marrying me? I mean, if you'd married someone else, someone without all this trouble, your life would be simpler." Eli set down the photographs he'd been sorting and moved around the table to sit beside her. "Mae, look at me." When she did, he took her hands. "Before I met you, I was losing my father's ranch and facing that loss alone. I was lonely, bitter, and watching everything I cared about slip away. You didn't just save the ranch, you saved me. You gave me purpose, partnership, and something I never expected to find. Love. Real, honest love. But this fight matters because you matter. Your father's memory matters. This land matters. We're not just defending property, Mae. We're defending the right to live our lives without being crushed by people who think money and power mean they can take whatever they want." He paused. "I don't regret a single moment. Not one." Mae's eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Eli Mercer. I love you too." They held each other as snow continued to fall outside, 2 people facing down something bigger than themselves but refusing to break. The next morning, Daniel called. "We've got a problem. The Brennan Corporation just filed a lawsuit claiming adverse possession of the Copper Creek property. They're arguing that Mae's father improperly claimed water rights 40 years ago, and that those rights and potentially the land itself actually belong to the corporation through some obscure historical claim. That's absurd, Eli said. Mae's father inherited that land from his parents. The water rights have been documented for generations. I know, but it's a delay tactic. They're trying to tie us up in litigation while they continue pressuring you. And there's more. They've applied for expedited mineral extraction rights with the state. If approved, they could begin survey work, regardless of who owns the surface rights. Eli felt rage building in his chest. How is any of this legal? It's not, ultimately. But the legal system moves slowly, and they're betting you'll give up before we can expose their tactics. Daniel's voice was grim. We need to move faster. I'm filing an emergency injunction to stop the mineral rights application, and I'm asking for a hearing on their adverse possession claim. But Eli, this is escalating. They're getting desperate. Good. Let them be desperate. After hanging up, Eli told Mae everything. She sat very still, processing the information. Then she stood abruptly. I'm going to the county office. I want to know who's filing these citations and approvals. Someone there is helping Brennan, and I'm going to find out who. Mae, be careful. If they're corrupt, then we expose them too. She drove to the county seat, and Eli spent the afternoon organizing their evidence. Around 3, his phone rang. It was Mae, her voice shaking with anger. I found him, Deputy County Commissioner Frank Morrison. I asked to see records of who filed the citations, and his name is on everything. He tried to brush me off, but I pushed. Eli, he's taking money from Brennan. He didn't admit it directly, but I could see it in his face when I mentioned the geological survey. He knows what they're doing. Did you get proof? No. But I know. She paused. I also ran into Judith at the post office. She pulled me aside and said something strange. She said, "Tell Eli to check the old Henderson property records. The mineral rights." What does that mean? Eli's mind raced. The Henderson place, the 200 acres his father had bought 20 years ago, the property he'd nearly lost to the bank. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. He drove to the county courthouse and spent 2 hours in the records office, pulling up every document related to the Henderson property. Most of it was familiar deed transfers, mortgage documents, tax records. But then he found something odd. A notation from 1952, when Bill Henderson's father had originally purchased the land from the Bureau of Land Management. Mineral rights. Reserved by the United States government. Eli stared at the document, his heart pounding. If the federal government had reserved mineral rights on the Henderson property and his father had bought it without realizing that, then technically those rights still belonged to the government. And if Brennan was trying to claim mineral rights on Mae's property through fraudulent means, they might not know that adjacent property had legitimate mineral rights that were unencumbered. It was a long shot, but it was something. He made copies of everything and called Daniel immediately. I think I found a way to stop them. That night he and Mae sat with all their evidence spread across the living room, photographs, documents, affidavits, property records, Robert's journal. It looked overwhelming, a paper mountain representing months of corporate harassment and their determination to fight back. Tomorrow, Daniel files everything. Eli said, emergency injunction, fraud complaint, documentation of harassment. We're laying it all out. What if it's not enough? Then we keep fighting. We go public. We find more evidence. We appeal. We don't stop, Mae. No matter what. She leaned against him, exhausted but resolute. When did you become so fierce? When I realized what I had to lose. He kissed her forehead. You. This life we've built. Our future together, they're not taking that. I won't let them. Outside, winter had settled over the valley. Snow covered the meadows and mountains, transforming the landscape into something pristine and quiet. Inside, Eli and Mae prepared for war. not with guns or violence, but with truth and determination and the unshakable belief that right would prevail. The climax was coming. They could feel it building like a storm on the horizon, and when it broke, they'd be ready, together. The emergency hearing was scheduled for December 10th in Federal District Court. Judge Margaret Ashford presided, a woman in her 70s, known for her no-nonsense approach and intolerance for corporate manipulation. Daniel had called her assignment a gift from above. The Brennan Corporation arrived with 4 lawyers, expensive suits, and an air of confidence that made Eli's blood boil. Richard Cornwall was there too, sitting in the front row with a smirk that said he expected this to be over quickly. Daniel stood and presented their case methodically. Robert Trundell's journal, documenting years of harassment. The geological survey obtained without authorization. Affidavits from witnesses who'd seen intimidation tactics. Eli's photographs proving the county citations were fabricated. The pattern of behavior showing systematic corporate bullying designed to force a sale. The Brennan lawyers objected, constantly, arguing that the journal was hearsay, that the affidavits were biased, that the citations were legitimate county concerns. But Judge Ashford listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that suggested she saw through their tactics. Then Daniel played his trump card. He presented the mineral rights documentation for the Henderson property, showing that federal mineral rights existed on land adjacent to what Brennan was trying to claim. He argued that if Brennan wanted to establish mineral extraction operations, they'd have to coordinate with federal authorities on the Henderson property anyway, making their aggressive pursuit of Mae's land legally questionable and strategically unnecessary. "Your Honor," Daniel said, "the Brennan Corporation has systematically harassed my clients, filed false citations through corrupt county officials, and attempted to steal land rights through fraudulent legal claims. All of this for mineral deposits that may or may not exist, on property where they'd need federal approval for adjacent land regardless. This isn't legitimate business practice. This is corporate thuggery." The Brennan lead attorney, a man named Harrison Webb, stood smoothly. "Your Honor, these are serious allegations without proof. Mr. Trundell was a troubled man whose health problems led to paranoid documentation. The county citations are legitimate environmental concerns, and our interest in the property is simply business. Mr. Webb." Judge Ashford's voice cut through the courtroom like a knife. "I've reviewed the evidence. The journal entries correlate with documented contacts between your corporation and Mr. Trundell. The geological survey in question was indeed commissioned without the landowner's knowledge or consent. And I have here," she held up a document, "a sworn statement from a county employee claiming Deputy Commissioner Morrison received payments from a Brennan Corporation subsidiary in exchange for expediting applications and filing citations against uncooperative landowners." The courtroom went silent. Cornwall's smirk vanished. Webb's face paled. "I'm granting the emergency injunction," Judge Ashford continued. "All mineral rights applications are suspended pending full investigation. All county citations against the Mercer properties are dismissed. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the State Attorney General for criminal investigation into corporate fraud, bribery, and harassment." She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "Mr. Webb, you can inform the Brennan Corporation that if they attempt any further contact with the Mercers, I will hold them in contempt. This case is adjourned." The gavel fell with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. Eli sat stunned. Mae gripped his hand so tightly it hurt. Daniel gathered his papers calmly, but Eli could see the satisfaction in his eyes. They'd won. Against all odds, against corporate power and money and corruption, they'd won. Cornwall tried to approach them as they left the courtroom, but Eli stepped between him and Mae. "Stay away from us. Stay away from our land. If I see you anywhere near our properties, I'll consider it trespassing." Cornwall's face twisted with anger, but he said nothing, just turned and walked away, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. Outside, in the cold December air, Mae broke down. Eli held her while she cried tears of relief, of grief for her father, of exhaustion from months of stress. Daniel gave them space, making calls to his office, letting them have this moment. Finally, Mae pulled back, wiping her eyes. "My father should be here. He should have seen this." "He did see it," Eli said gently. "He documented everything, gave us the tools to fight. This victory is his as much as ours." Daniel approached, putting a hand on Mae's shoulder. "Bob would be proud of you. Of both of you. You didn't back down. You didn't let them win." "What happens now?" Mae asked. "Now the state investigates. Criminal charges are likely against Morrison and possibly others at the county. The Brennan Corporation will probably pay fines, maybe face additional charges. And you two," he smiled, "you get to go home and live your lives in peace." They drove back to the ranch in silence, both processing what had happened. The fight that had consumed months of their lives was over. The threat that had loomed over them was gone. They were free. As they pulled up to the house, Mae turned to Eli. "We did it. We did it. Together, always together," Eli agreed. Inside, the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from its walls. They built a fire in the fireplace and sat together on the couch, not talking, just being present. The winter evening settled around them, peaceful and quiet. The next morning, Mae woke before dawn. Eli found her in the kitchen, already dressed, her father's journal in her hands. She looked up when he entered, her eyes red but clear. "I want to go to his grave." "Tell him what happened. I'll come with you." They drove to the small cemetery on the edge of town, where Robert Trundell was buried beside his wife. The morning was cold and still, frost coating everything in white. Mae stood before the simple headstone, holding the journal against her chest. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to find this. Sorry I didn't know what you were going through." Her voice broke. "But I want you to know we did it. We beat them. The Brennan Corporation won't hurt anyone else the way they hurt you. Your documentation, everything you recorded, it was enough. You gave us the truth, and the truth won." She knelt and placed the journal at the base of the headstone. "I'm leaving this with you. You earned this victory. You fought them first, gave us the weapons to finish the fight." She paused, touching the cold stone. "And Dad, I found someone. A good man, like you always hoped I would. His name is Eli. You would have liked him." Eli stepped forward and knelt beside her. "Mr. Trundell, I promise you I'll take care of your daughter. I'll honor your memory and protect what you built. And I'll make sure people remember what you did, how you stood up to them when no one else would." They stayed for a while, the silence broken only by the wind moving through the bare trees. Finally, Mae stood, wiping her eyes. "I'm ready to go home." On the way back, they stopped at a stonemason's shop in town. Mae ordered a memorial stone for her father's grave, simple granite, with an inscription she wrote herself. "Robert Trundell, defender of truth, protector of family, his courage lives on." "It'll be ready in 2 weeks," the mason said. "I'll install it personally." At the ranch, they found the driveway full of vehicles. Tom and Amy Hendricks, Judith from the post office, neighbors from up and down the valley. Someone had strung up a banner that read "Victory" in hand-painted letters. Tom met them at the truck, grinning. "Word travels fast in a small valley. We wanted to celebrate with you." The kitchen was full of food people had brought, casseroles, pies, bread, a massive roast. Amy had organized everything, and the house buzzed with conversation and laughter. People who'd been afraid to get involved now came forward, congratulating Eli and Mae, sharing their own stories of Brennan Corporation pressure. "You did what a lot of us were too scared to do," one rancher said. "Stood up to them, made them blink. That takes guts." Judith pulled Mae aside, tears in her eyes. "Your father would be so proud. Bob was a good man who deserved better than what they did to him. I'm glad you got justice for him." The celebration lasted into the evening. People ate and talked and shared stories. Someone brought out a guitar, and there was music. For the first time in months, the ranch felt truly alive. Not just inhabited, but filled with life and joy and community. As the sun set, Eli and Mae stood on the porch, watching their neighbors socialize. Mae leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I never thought I'd have this," she said quietly. "Community, people who care, a husband who loves me. All of it seemed impossible 6 months ago. 6 months ago I was losing everything. Now I have more than I ever imagined." He kissed her temple. "You saved me, Mae, in every way that matters." We saved each other. As darkness fell and people began heading home, Tom and Amy were the last to leave. Tom shook Eli's hand firmly. "You're good people, both of you. This valley's better for having you in it." After everyone left, Eli and Mae cleaned up together, moving through the familiar rhythm of washing dishes and putting away food. When they finished, Mae took Eli's hand and led him outside. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead. They walked to the gate they'd built, the one connecting their two properties. Mae ran her hand over the iron, touching the overlapping circles at the center. "This is where it all comes together," she said. "Two separate pieces becoming one, stronger together than apart. Like us, she agreed. They stood there in the starlight, two people who'd found each other in desperation and built something genuine from practical necessity. The fight was over, the threat was gone, and ahead of them stretched the rest of their lives, shared, honest, and filled with the kind of love neither had expected to find. "Let's go home," Mae said. "We are home," Eli replied. And they were, finally, completely, home. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it transformed the valley into something magnificent. Green spread across the meadows, wild flowers dotted the hillsides, and Copper Creek ran high with snowmelt. Eli and Mae worked the land together, their movements synchronized from months of partnership, planning for the season ahead. The memorial stone for Robert Trundell stood proudly in the cemetery now, and Mae visited it every Sunday after church. The Brennan Corporation had paid substantial fines and faced criminal charges. Deputy Commissioner Morrison had resigned in disgrace. The valley had returned to its quiet rhythm, unmarred by corporate pressure and intimidation. But the real changes were subtler, more personal. One Saturday morning in late May, Eli carried a large piece of wood from his workshop to the truck, a bench he'd been building for weeks. Mae came out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron, and smiled when she saw it. "Is that the bench you've been keeping secret?" "It is. Come help me install it." They drove to the gate connecting their properties, where the trail wound through aspen groves and offered views of both the Mercer Ranch and the Copper Creek land. The spot was special, the physical place where their two worlds met. Eli had chosen it carefully. The bench was simple but beautiful, crafted from oak with a curved back and smooth seats. He'd carved their initials into the backrest, E, M, and M, intertwined like the circles on the gate. Underneath, he'd added a date, the day they'd married, and below that, a single line, "Love found here." They set it in concrete footings, positioning it perfectly to face the morning sun. When they finished, they sat together, Mae running her hand over the smooth wood. "It's beautiful, Eli. I wanted us to have a place. Somewhere we could come and remember where we started. See how far we've come." He took her hand. "This is where two desperate people made a practical arrangement. Where loneliness met loneliness and somehow became love." Mae leaned against him, comfortable and content. "I was so scared that day we married. Scared you'd regret it, scared I'd fail you, scared I'd end up even more alone than before. And now I can't imagine life without you. Can't remember what it felt like to be that lonely." She paused. "You know what my father used to say?" He said, "The best things in life come from taking chances on hope rather than dwelling in fear." I didn't understand what he meant until I met you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the valley wake up around them. Birds sang in the trees, wind moved through the new grass, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed peacefully. It was the sound of a life well lived, of land tended with care and respect. "I have something to tell you," Mae said after a while. Amy Hendricks asked if we'd be willing to mentor a young couple who just bought the old Miller place. They're struggling, don't know much about ranching, and she thought we could help. What do you think? Eli smiled. I think that's exactly what we should do. Pass on what we know, help them avoid the mistakes we made, and tell them our story, how two broken people found each other. Why not? It's a good story, true story. He kissed her hand. Love found in desperation, tested by adversity, strengthened by partnership. That's worth sharing. Over the following weeks, they did exactly that. The young couple, Sarah and Mike Patterson, became regular visitors. Eli taught Mike about fence repair, cattle management, and equipment maintenance. Mae showed Sarah her gardens, her preserving techniques, her mother's old recipes. And in the evenings, over shared meals, they told their story, the honest parts and the hard parts, the fear and the hope, the journey from practical arrangement to genuine love. Sarah pulled Mae aside one evening. Thank you for being so honest about your struggles. Everyone else makes marriage look easy, like it just happens naturally, but you're showing us it's work. Beautiful work, but work. The best things always are, Mae replied. As summer deepened, the bench became a ritual. Every Sunday evening, Eli and Mae would walk to the gate and sit together, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. They'd talk about the week past, the week ahead, the life they were building. Sometimes they'd bring wine, sometimes just coffee. Always they'd sit close, Mae's head on Eli's shoulder, his arm around her waist. One evening in late July, as the sky turned the color of fire, Mae said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't taken that chance? If I'd been too proud or scared to advertise for a husband, if you'd been too proud to respond, sometimes. But then I remember we were meant to find each other. All the circumstances, all the desperation, all the loneliness, it was leading us here, to this bench, this view, this life. You really believe that?" "I do. Some things are just meant to be." Mae smiled and kissed him, soft and sweet in the fading light. "Then I'm glad we were brave enough to let it happen." They stayed until full dark, reluctant to leave their special place. Finally, as stars began to appear, they walked hand in hand back to the ranch house. Lights glowed in the windows, warm and welcoming. Home. Inside, Mae started making tea while Eli built a small fire against the evening chill. They moved around each other with the ease of long practice, each anticipating the other's needs. When the tea was ready, they sat together on the couch, the same couch where they'd first started opening up to each other all those months ago. "I love you, Mae Mercer," Eli said. "I love you, Eli Mercer," Mae replied. Simple words, but they carried the weight of everything they'd been through, the desperation and hope, the fear and courage, the loneliness that had brought them together, and the love that kept them there. Outside, the valley settled into its night rhythms. And inside, two people who'd found each other against all odds held each other close, grateful for second chances and brave choices and love that grew from honest soil. Sometimes the best things really do come from desperate choices. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to hope, love finds you exactly when you need it most.